"The snow won't touch her," someone whispered, and suddenly the entire pack fell silent. Evelyn Harper stood alone at the edge of the winter moon courtyard, her thin white cloak trembling in the northern wind while heavy snow spiraled through the night sky around her. It covered the stone paths. It dusted the shoulders of every wolf gathered beneath the silver lanterns. It settled into the dark fur cloaks of the guards standing watch along the walls. But not a single snowflake landed on Evelyn. They dissolved inches above her skin like invisible heat surrounded her body, vanishing before contact, and the sight of it made unease spread through the crowd faster than the storm itself. Evelyn lowered her eyes, pretending not to notice the stares, though she felt every single one of them like needles pressing into her skin. Broken Omega. The words had followed her for years like a curse whispered behind closed doors. She couldn't shift. She carried no scent. No wolf had ever reacted to her presence the way they should have. At 22 years old, she remained something shameful inside a kingdom built on strength and bloodlines. "Keep your head down," her aunt murmured sharply beside her. "Don't embarrass us tonight." Evelyn swallowed hard and nodded, even though embarrassment had become as natural as breathing. Around her, the winter moon ceremony glittered with wealth and power. Hundreds of wolves from noble packs filled the courtyard dressed in silver and black, their laughter rising into the frozen air while musicians played softly beneath glowing crystal arches. Tonight mattered more than any ceremony before it. The Alpha King himself had arrived in the Northern Territories for the first time in 7 years. Every unmated daughter had spent months preparing for this night. Every family hoped for favor, alliances, or attention from the throne. Every family except hers. Evelyn was only here because tradition demanded every unmated Omega stand before the moon goddess during the blessing ritual. A formality, a humiliation disguised as religion. She could already hear the whispers moving through the crowd. That's her. The broken one. Why would they even bring her? The moon goddess abandoned that girl years ago. Evelyn wrapped her arms tighter around herself as icy wind swept through the courtyard. The cold should have burned her skin by now, but instead she only felt numbness, deep and familiar. Somewhere in the distance, bells rang across the fortress walls. Once, twice, 3 times. The Alpha King had entered the city. Instantly, the atmosphere shifted. Excitement crackled through the crowd like electricity. Wolves straightened their posture. Noble daughters adjusted their gowns and lifted hopeful eyes toward the palace gates beyond the courtyard. Evelyn tried to disappear further into the shadows near the stone pillars, but then the oldest elder stepped forward beside the sacred fire and pointed directly at her. "Bring the broken Omega forward," he announced coldly. Every conversation stopped. Evelyn's breath caught painfully in her throat as hundreds of eyes turned toward her at once. Her legs felt weak beneath her gown, but she forced herself to walk toward the center of the courtyard while snow continued falling everywhere except on her. Murmurs spread louder now, edged with fear instead of mockery. The elder's face tightened as he stared upward into the storm. "The prophecy," someone whispered from the crowd. "No," another voice answered quickly. "That prophecy was buried generations ago." Evelyn barely heard them, because for the first time in her life, she felt something strange stir beneath her ribs. Warmth, soft, ancient, awake. And somewhere beyond the fortress walls, a deep male voice echoed through her mind like distant thunder. "I finally found you." The warmth inside Evelyn's chest vanished the moment the elder seized her wrist and dragged her toward the center of the sacred circle. Gasps rippled through the courtyard as silver firelight danced across the snow-covered stones beneath her feet. Every noble family stood watching now. Every guard, every servant. No one looked away. Evelyn tried to steady her breathing while the elder raised his voice over the storm. "For generations, the winter moon blessing has protected this kingdom from impurity and weakness," he declared. "Tonight, before the moon goddess and before the Alpha King himself enters these sacred walls, we cast out all darkness hiding among us." Evelyn's stomach tightened. She already knew what was coming. The elder released her wrist with visible disgust. "Kneel." The word struck harder than the icy wind. Around the courtyard, several wolves lowered their eyes awkwardly, while others watched openly with cruel fascination. Evelyn slowly sank to her knees on the frozen stone, her thin gown pooling around her in the snowless space surrounding her body. Her aunt stood near the back of the crowd with her arms crossed tightly, refusing to meet her gaze. "Please," Evelyn whispered softly. "I did nothing wrong. You were born wrong." A woman snapped from somewhere in the crowd, followed by scattered laughter. Heat burned behind Evelyn's eyes, but she refused to cry. Not here. Not in front of all of them again. The elder lifted a silver ceremonial staff toward the dark sky. "The broken Omega stands before the moon goddess without scent, without wolf, without purpose," he announced. "If there is impurity upon her soul, let winter expose it." Snow continued falling heavily around the circle, but still none of it touched her. Fear slowly replaced mockery in the crowd now. Wolves shifted uneasily. Whispering spread faster. "This is unnatural. Something is wrong. Look at the snow." A young noblewoman suddenly stepped forward from the front row, her silver gown sparkling beneath the lantern light. Celeste Ashbourne, daughter of the Northern Beta. Beautiful, proud, cruel in the effortless way only privileged people could be. She looked down at Evelyn with cold blue eyes and smiled faintly. "Perhaps the moon goddess simply does not want to touch damaged things," she said softly, loud enough for everyone to hear. Several people laughed again, though more nervously this time. Evelyn lowered her gaze toward the frozen stone, trying to disappear into silence. Then Celeste reached forward and yanked the white cloak from Evelyn's shoulders. Cold wind swept instantly across her exposed arms. "There," Celeste continued. "At least now she looks as pitiful as she truly is." The humiliation hit harder than the freezing air. Evelyn's fingers trembled against the ground while the crowd stared openly at her simple pale dress, worn thin at the sleeves from years of use. She heard someone mutter the word defective again. Another voice whispered cursed. Then suddenly every torch in the courtyard flickered at once. The wind changed direction violently. A deep horn echoed through the fortress gates. Once, twice, 3 times. Silence crashed over the entire courtyard. Even Celeste stepped backward. The royal guards along the walls immediately dropped to one knee. Heavy black horses emerged through the falling snow beyond the gates, their armor gleaming silver beneath the moonlight. Behind them came warriors dressed in obsidian cloaks marked with the crest of the royal wolf. And at the center of them all rode a man dressed entirely in black. Alpha King Lucian Blackthorn had arrived. Evelyn felt it before she truly saw him. Power rolled across the courtyard like a storm front, ancient and cold and impossibly heavy. Wolves lowered their heads instinctively as he dismounted slowly onto the snow-covered stone. But the moment his silver eyes lifted toward the sacred circle, he stopped moving completely. His gaze locked onto Evelyn like the rest of the world had vanished. And for the first time in her life, the snow above her head began to glow. The glowing snow above Evelyn's head drifted slowly through the air like silver ash suspended in time. No one moved. No one breathed. Even the storm itself seemed to hesitate beneath the weight of the Alpha King's presence. Lucian Blackthorn stood at the entrance of the sacred courtyard with one gloved hand resting loosely at his side, while icy wind swept through the dark fabric of his coat. He looked nothing like the stories whispered across the kingdom. He looked worse, more dangerous, more beautiful. The silver lanterns reflected in his pale eyes, making them appear almost unreal against the sharp angles of his face. His dark hair brushed the collar of his black coat, while snow settled across his broad shoulders without melting. Every instinct inside Evelyn screamed at her to lower her eyes immediately, but she could not look away. Something about him felt painfully familiar, ancient, like a memory buried somewhere deep inside her soul. Around the courtyard, wolves remained frozen in silence. Lucian's reputation alone could silence entire rooms. He was the king who ended wars before they began, the king who never smiled, the king who never showed mercy twice. Yet now he stood completely motionless, staring only at her. The elder cleared his throat nervously and stepped forward with lowered eyes. "Your Majesty," he began carefully, "we apologize for delaying your arrival ceremony. We were simply purifying the sacred grounds before your blessing." Lucian did not answer. His gaze never left Evelyn. The pressure in the courtyard grew heavier by the second. Several wolves shifted uncomfortably beneath it. Evelyn's pulse pounded so loudly she barely heard Celeste step closer beside the elder. "She should not remain in the sacred circle," Celeste said quickly, forcing a graceful smile toward the king. "The girl is defective. The pack only wishes to spare your majesty from unnecessary discomfort. Evelyn flinched quietly at the word again. Defective. Broken. Worthless. The names never stopped hurting no matter how many years passed. Lucien's expression remained unreadable, but the air around him turned colder. What? He said finally, his deep voice cutting through the storm like distant thunder. Is her name? The question stunned the entire courtyard. The elder blinked in confusion before quickly answering. Evelyn Harper, your majesty. Lucien repeated it softly beneath his breath. Evelyn. Her name sounded different in his voice. Softer somehow, like something precious handled carefully. Evelyn's chest tightened unexpectedly. The strange warmth inside her returned again, spreading slowly beneath her ribs. Snowlight shimmered brighter above her head. Murmurs immediately spread through the crowd. The prophecy. It cannot be. The Moon Queen legend was destroyed centuries ago. Evelyn did not understand any of it. She only knew that the closer Lucien stepped toward the sacred circle, the stronger the warmth inside her became. Then suddenly the king stopped again. His silver eyes narrowed, slightly as though he was listening to something no one else could hear. For the first time since entering the courtyard, real emotion flickered across his face. Shock. Not fear. Not anger. Recognition. Evelyn's breathing grew uneven as the same voice from earlier echoed once more inside her mind. Clearer now. Closer now. Mine. Her hands trembled against the frozen stone. She looked around quickly, but no one reacted. No one else heard it. Lucien took another slow step forward into the falling snow. Every wolf instinctively lowered their head further as his power rolled across the courtyard in waves. Yet Evelyn noticed something strange then. The snow touching his shoulders had begun melting too. Steam rose faintly around him as though winter itself could not fully hold him either. The elder's voice shook slightly. Your Majesty, perhaps we should continue the blessing ceremony inside. Lucien ignored him completely. His eyes remained fixed on Evelyn with terrifying focus. Then, before anyone could stop him, the Alpha King walked directly into the sacred circle beside the girl every pack in the north had called broken. The moment Lucien Blackthorn entered the sacred circle, the storm above the courtyard changed. Wind spiraled outward from the center stones in slow, powerful waves, lifting silver snow into the air around him like drifting smoke. Wolves immediately backed away several feet without realizing they were moving. Even the royal guards looked unsettled now. Evelyn remained frozen on her knees, her heart pounding painfully against her ribs while the Alpha King stopped only a few feet in front of her. Up close, his presence felt overwhelming. Not loud, not wild. Worse, controlled, like standing near a mountain moments before an avalanche. His silver eyes stayed fixed on her face with frightening intensity, studying her as though he had searched for something impossible his entire life and suddenly found it standing before him in the snow. Evelyn lowered her gaze first. Your Majesty, she whispered shakily. Lucien did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked upward at the glowing snow drifting above her head. Tiny silver lights swirled around Evelyn, like frozen stars, refusing to touch her skin. The elder stepped closer nervously. This disturbance began moments before your arrival, he explained quickly. The girl has always been strange. Weak. The pack only intended to complete the purification ritual before your blessing ceremony. Lucien's expression darkened slightly. Purification. The single word carried enough weight to silence the courtyard again. Celeste straightened beside the elder and forced another graceful smile. Your Majesty misunderstands, she said carefully. No one wishes harm upon the girl. But the kingdom has traditions. Omegas without wolves are considered, she hesitated briefly. Unstable. Evelyn felt the humiliation burn through her chest again. Her fingers curled tightly against the frozen stone beneath her knees. Lucien noticed immediately. His gaze dropped to her trembling hands. Then lower, to the pale skin exposed where her cloak had been torn away. The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Who removed her cloak? He asked quietly. No one answered. The silence stretched too long. Finally, Celeste lifted her chin proudly. I did. Lucien turned toward her slowly. The movement alone made several wolves step backward. Why? Celeste swallowed once before recovering her confidence. Because she was standing in a sacred circle before the Alpha King looking like a beggar. A few nervous laughs rose from the crowd before dying instantly beneath Lucien's stare. Evelyn wished the ground would open beneath her feet. She hated this. Hated being looked at, judged, pitted, feared. Her entire life had been one endless moment of standing alone while everyone decided what she was worth. But then Lucien looked back at her again, and something inside her chest softened unexpectedly. He was not looking at her the way the others did. There was no disgust in his eyes. No pity either. Only certainty. Like he already knew something the rest of the kingdom did not. The warmth beneath Evelyn's ribs spread stronger now. Her skin tingled faintly beneath the glowing snowfall overhead. Then suddenly one silver snowflake drifted lower than the others. It landed gently against the back of her trembling hand instead of disappearing. The entire courtyard gasped. Silver light instantly spread beneath Evelyn's skin like moonlight moving through water. She inhaled sharply as warmth rushed through her body. Not painful, not frightening, familiar. Lucien took one step closer. Impossible, the elder whispered beside them. Another snowflake landed. Then another. Instead of melting, they clung to Evelyn's skin like tiny glowing crystals. The storm above the courtyard brightened. Wolves began murmuring again, louder now. The prophecy. The snow accepts her. That cannot happen. Evelyn looked up in confusion, her pale eyes wide with fear and disbelief. I do not understand, she whispered softly. Lucien stared at her for one long silent moment before speaking in a voice low enough that only she heard him. You were never broken, Evelyn. And for the first time in her life, someone said her name like it mattered. No one in the courtyard moved after Lucien spoke those words. The storm howled beyond the fortress walls, but inside the sacred circle, silence pressed against Evelyn's ears so heavily she could hear her own heartbeat. You were never broken. The sentence echoed through her mind again and again, softening something inside her that had been frozen for years. Evelyn stared up at the Alpha King with wide, uncertain eyes, while silver snow continued drifting gently onto her skin. It no longer vanished above her. It welcomed her. The glowing flakes settled across her trembling hands and bare shoulders like moonlight finally recognizing its own reflection. Around them, whispers spread rapidly through the gathered wolves. Fear now outweighed mockery completely. The snow blessing. I thought it was only a legend. The Moon Queen prophecy was erased centuries ago. Then why is this happening? The elder's face had gone pale beneath the lantern light. He tightened his grip around the ceremonial staff while staring at Evelyn as though seeing a stranger for the first time. Your Majesty, he said carefully, struggling to steady his voice. These old stories are dangerous. The kingdom buried them for a reason. Lucien slowly turned his head toward him. Stories do not bury themselves. The elder immediately lowered his eyes. Even the noble families standing near the front stepped backward beneath the cold authority in Lucien's voice. Evelyn felt completely lost now. Prophecies, legends, moon queens. None of it made sense. She had spent her entire life being ignored by the moon goddess, mocked by wolves stronger than her, treated like an embarrassment no pack wanted to claim. How could these people suddenly look at her with fear instead of disgust? Celeste Ashbourne clearly hated the change most of all. Her perfect composure had started cracking beneath the growing tension in the courtyard. This is absurd, she snapped sharply. She is nothing more than a scentless Omega playing tricks with old magic. Evelyn flinched quietly at the cruelty in her voice, but Lucien did not even glance toward Celeste this time. His attention remained entirely on Evelyn. Slowly, carefully, he removed the heavy black cloak draped across his shoulders. Gasps immediately spread through the crowd. Royal wolves never removed their cloaks during ceremonial appearances. It symbolized vulnerability, trust. Lucien stepped forward and lowered the thick warm fabric around Evelyn's shoulders himself. The heat trapped inside the cloak wrapped around her instantly, carrying the faint scent of winter pine and cold mountain air. Evelyn's breath caught painfully in her throat. No one had ever done something gentle for her in front of others before. Not once. Your Majesty, Celeste protested loudly, desperation slipping into her voice now. She is beneath you. Lucien finally looked at her. The silver in his eyes darkened like an approaching storm. Careful, he said quietly. One word. That was all it took. Celeste immediately fell silent. Evelyn's hands tightened against the edges of the cloak while emotion burned behind her eyes again. She hated how easily kindness affected her, like starving too long and suddenly remembering what warmth felt like. Then the strange energy inside her chest pulsed harder than before. Sharp this time. Powerful. The glowing snow around her began circling faster through the air, forming silver streams of light around the sacred circle. Wolves stumbled backward in alarm. Royal guards immediately moved toward Lucien, but he lifted one hand slightly, without looking away from Evelyn. They stopped instantly. "Do not fear it," Lucien said softly to her. Evelyn shook her head faintly. "I do not know what is happening." His expression softened almost invisibly. Neither did she. "Who?" Evelyn whispered. Before Lucien could answer, the oldest woman in the courtyard suddenly stepped forward from the crowd. Bent with age and wrapped in dark gray furs, she stared at Evelyn with tears shining in her ancient eyes. Then, to the shock of every wolf watching, the old woman slowly lowered herself onto one knee before Evelyn Harper. "The bloodline has returned," she whispered shakily. "After all these years, the Moon Queen has finally awakened." The moment the old woman knelt before Evelyn, panic spread through the courtyard like wildfire. Noble families exchanged frightened glances while guards tightened their grips on ceremonial spears. No one knew where to look anymore. At the girl they had mocked only minutes ago, at the glowing snow circling above the sacred stones, or at the Alpha King standing beside her with an expression colder than the storm itself. Evelyn's breathing turned uneven beneath Lucien's heavy black cloak. Moon Queen. The words felt impossible. Ridiculous. She had spent years praying for even the smallest sign that the moon goddess had not abandoned her completely, and now suddenly strangers looked at her as though she carried something sacred beneath her skin. "No," Evelyn whispered softly, shaking her head. "You have mistaken me for someone else." The old woman slowly looked up at her, tears shining in her pale, cloudy eyes. "I knew your mother," she whispered. Evelyn froze instantly. The warmth inside her chest pulsed sharply again. "My mother?" The woman nodded weakly. "Alara Harper." The name hit Evelyn harder than winter wind. Her mother had died when Evelyn was only 10 years old. Few people ever spoke about her anymore. Most acted as though she had never existed at all. Evelyn remembered soft hands brushing through her hair beside a fireplace. Silver lullabies sung quietly during snowstorms. A scent like winter roses. But every memory felt faded now, buried beneath years of loneliness. "You knew her?" Evelyn asked quietly. The woman's lips trembled. "Your mother carried the old bloodline. The last of it. She begged the kingdom to protect you after she was gone." Murmurs immediately exploded around the courtyard. "The Harper woman? I thought those rumors died with her." The royal bloodline of the Moon Queen was exterminated. Then why does the snow obey the girl? Evelyn looked toward Lucien helplessly, but his expression remained unreadable. Only his eyes softened slightly when they met hers. "You knew," she whispered. "Did you know about this?" Lucien was silent for a long moment while snowlight reflected across his face. "I knew someone survived," he admitted quietly. "I did not know it was you." The elder stepped forward suddenly, his voice sharp with fear. "Your Majesty, this has gone far enough. Dangerous myths cannot return to this kingdom." Lucien slowly turned toward him. "You fear myths because truth survived them." The elder stiffened beneath the king's gaze. Around them, the storm intensified beyond the fortress walls, but inside the sacred circle, silver light continued glowing brighter around Evelyn's body. Her skin tingled painfully now. Not cold. Energy. Ancient and restless. Evelyn pressed one trembling hand against her chest as the strange warmth spread through her veins again. "Something is wrong," she whispered. Lucien noticed immediately. He stepped closer without hesitation. "Look at me, Evelyn." His voice cut gently through the panic rising inside her. She forced herself to lift her eyes toward him. "Breathe slowly." The command should have sounded cold coming from someone like him, but instead it grounded her, steadied her. The storm inside her chest softened slightly beneath the calm certainty in his voice. Lucien studied her carefully for several seconds before lifting one gloved hand toward her face. He paused inches away, giving her time to pull back if she wished. Evelyn did not move. His fingers brushed lightly against her temple, barely touching her skin at all. Warmth surged through her instantly. The glowing snow above them brightened violently. Wolves stumbled backward in alarm. Several lantern flames burst silver all at once. Evelyn gasped softly as flashes suddenly exploded through her mind. A silver crown beneath moonlight. A woman with glowing eyes standing in falling snow. A massive black wolf bowing before her. Then another image appeared clearer than the rest. Lucian himself standing alone in darkness years ago, his silver eyes filled with grief, while whispering the same words she heard inside her mind. I finally found you. Evelyn staggered backward as the vision shattered inside her mind like glass beneath ice. Her breathing turned sharp and uneven while silver light spiraled violently around the sacred circle. The storm above the courtyard answered instantly. Wind slammed against the fortress towers hard enough to rattle every lantern chain hanging from the stone walls. Several wolves cried out in alarm as snow burst upward from the ground instead of falling from the sky. Lucian caught Evelyn gently before she could lose balance completely. One strong hand steadied her waist while the other remained near her shoulder, careful and controlled despite the chaos erupting around them. Easy, he murmured quietly. The warmth of his voice cut through the panic flooding her chest. Evelyn looked up at him with trembling eyes. I saw you, she whispered. Lucian's expression tightened slightly. What did you see? You were alone. Her voice shook softly. You sounded, she swallowed hard. Sad. Something ancient and exhausted flickered behind Lucian's silver eyes before disappearing again beneath control. Around them, the courtyard had dissolved into confusion. Noble families moved away from the sacred circle while guards struggled to calm frightened wolves. The old woman who had knelt before Evelyn remained bowed with tears running silently down her face. The bloodline remembers him, she whispered. Just like the prophecy promised. The elder looked horrified now. Enough. His voice cracked sharply through the courtyard. This madness ends tonight. He lifted the ceremonial staff high toward the storming sky. The Moon Queen line nearly destroyed this kingdom once before. We will not allow it to rise again. Evelyn stared at him in confusion. Destroyed. The old woman looked up immediately. No. Her voice trembled with emotion. They lied to you, child. The elder's face darkened instantly. Silence. They murdered her. The woman cried suddenly. Gasps exploded through the courtyard. They betrayed the last Moon Queen because they feared her power. Evelyn's heart stopped. What? Lucian's jaw tightened visibly beside her. The old woman pointed a shaking hand toward the royal banners hanging above the fortress walls. The old bloodline protected wolves long before kings sat on thrones. The Moon Queens were chosen by the goddess herself. Tears streamed down her weathered face now. But powerful men feared kneeling to women blessed by the moon. Silence crashed across the courtyard again. Evelyn's pulse thundered painfully in her ears. Her mother, the prophecy, the visions. None of it sounded real, yet every word awakened something buried deep inside her soul. Your mother hid you, the old woman whispered. She sealed your power to keep you alive. Evelyn's knees weakened beneath her. Suddenly her entire childhood felt different. The isolation. The missing wolf. The emptiness she carried for years. None of it had been weakness at all. It had been hidden. Protected. Lucian slowly looked down at her. Your mother saved your life. Evelyn's eyes burned with tears. She could not stop anymore. Then why did everyone hate me? The question came out smaller than she intended. Honest. Broken in a way she had never allowed herself to sound before. Something shifted visibly in Lucian's expression then. Not pity. Pain. As though her question wounded something inside him too. Because kingdoms fear what they cannot control, he answered quietly. Before Evelyn could speak again, Celeste suddenly stepped forward from the crowd, pale with fury and fear. This cannot be true, she snapped loudly. She is nobody. Silver wind exploded across the sacred circle instantly. Lantern flames bent violently sideways. The glowing snow around Evelyn surged brighter, reacting before she even understood what was happening. Celeste stumbled backward in shock while every wolf around them lowered their heads instinctively beneath the pressure filling the air. Evelyn gasped softly, staring down at her own glowing hands in disbelief. The warmth inside her no longer felt small or hidden. It felt awake. And standing beside her in the storm, Lucian Blackthorn looked at her with absolute certainty before speaking the words that silenced the entire kingdom. She is the rightful queen. The words echoed across the frozen courtyard like a judgment spoken by the moon itself. She is the rightful queen. No one moved after Lucien said it. Noble families stood frozen beneath the silver storm, while fear spread openly across faces that had mocked Evelyn only moments earlier. The glowing snow circling her body had become brighter now, flowing through the sacred circle in slow, luminous currents that painted the frozen ground silver beneath her feet. Evelyn could barely breathe. Queen. The title felt impossible against the weight of every cruel name she had carried her entire life. Broken. Defective. Worthless. Those words had shaped her for so long that hearing something beautiful attached to her name felt almost painful. No, the elder said suddenly, his voice trembling with panic. The kingdom will never accept this. Lucien turned slowly toward him. The kingdom accepted lies for 20 years. The elder's face hardened. You would risk civil war over a girl hidden by traitors? The moment the word traitor left his mouth, the silver light around Evelyn flared violently. Wind burst outward from the sacred circle hard enough to extinguish half the lanterns in the courtyard. Wolves cried out as freezing air swept across the stone paths like a living force. Evelyn gasped softly and clutched Lucien's cloak tighter around herself. I did not do that, she whispered in alarm. I know, Lucien answered immediately. His voice remained calm despite the storm building around them. He stepped closer again, placing himself between Evelyn and the crowd almost instinctively. The gesture did not go unnoticed. Murmurs spread rapidly among the gathered wolves now. The Alpha King is protecting her. He stands beside her publicly. The royal bond. Could she truly be chosen by the moon goddess? Celeste Ashbourne looked horrified as she stared at Lucien standing near Evelyn. Your Majesty, she said sharply, struggling to maintain composure. This girl has no training, no status, no control over whatever power this is. Her eyes flashed toward Evelyn with bitterness. She does not belong beside a king. Evelyn lowered her gaze immediately, shame rising through her chest on instinct alone. But before she could retreat into silence again, Lucien spoke without taking his eyes off her. Neither did I. The quiet honesty in his voice stunned the courtyard again. Even Evelyn looked up in surprise. For the first time since arriving, the cold distance around Lucien seemed to crack slightly. Kings are not born worthy, he said calmly. They become worthy through what they protect. His silver eyes finally lifted toward the crowd. And I will protect her. The declaration rolled across the courtyard with terrifying certainty. Several wolves immediately lowered themselves onto one knee without being ordered. Others hesitated only seconds before following. Fear, respect, instinct. Evelyn stared around in disbelief as powerful nobles who once would not even look at her now bowed their heads in her presence. Not all of them obeyed. The elder remained standing rigidly beside the sacred fire. Celeste stood beside him as well, pale with fury. This changes nothing, the elder warned darkly. The old bloodline nearly destroyed the throne once before. Lucien's expression turned dangerously still. Then perhaps the throne deserved to fall. Silence crashed down again. Evelyn's heart pounded painfully while the storm above them suddenly began slowing. The glowing snow drifting around her softened into gentle silver flakes once more. Then, deep beneath her ribs, she felt it clearly for the first time. Not warmth. Not power. A wolf. Ancient and graceful and impossibly calm. Evelyn inhaled sharply as a soft silver glow appeared briefly within her pale eyes before fading again. Gasps spread instantly through the courtyard. She has a wolf. After all these years, tears burned behind Evelyn's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her chest. All her life, she had been told she was empty, broken, incomplete. Yet now, standing in the center of the sacred circle while wolves bowed around her and the Alpha King guarded her side, she realized the truth hurt far more than the lie ever had. They had never feared her weakness. They had feared what she would become once she remembered who she was. The storm finally began to quiet above the fortress, but the silence that replaced it felt even heavier. Hundreds of wolves remained kneeling across the frozen courtyard while silver snow drifted softly through the lantern light like pieces of a forgotten dream returning to life. Evelyn stood motionless in the center of the sacred circle wrapped in Lucien's black cloak, her chest rising unevenly as the truth settled painfully inside her. She had spent years believing she was less than everyone around her. Yet now the same people who once refused to stand beside her could not even lift their eyes to meet hers. The realization did not feel triumphant the way she imagined it should. It felt lonely. Lucien seemed to understand without her saying a word. He remained beside her quietly, while the glowing snow circled slower around them both. The warmth of his presence grounded her in a way nothing else could. For the first time all night, Evelyn no longer felt invisible. The old woman slowly rose from her knees with trembling hands. "The kingdom has waited 20 years for this night," she whispered emotionally. "The moon goddess has finally restored balance." The elder looked exhausted now, the anger in his face replaced by something closer to defeat. "If the prophecy truly survives," he said heavily, "then the throne itself will change." Lucien's silver eyes remained calm. "It already has." A low murmur spread through the courtyard again. Wolves exchanged uncertain glances while snow continued falling softly around the sacred circle. Evelyn looked toward the sky above the fortress towers, her pale eyes reflecting silver light. The strange emptiness she carried her entire life was gone now. In its place, she felt something ancient breathing softly. Inside her soul, her wolf, patient, awake, waiting. A sudden memory surfaced quietly through her mind then. Her mother kneeling beside a fireplace years ago, brushing gentle fingers through Evelyn's hair while whispering words she had been too young to understand. "When winter bows before you, do not fear the storm. It means the moon remembers your name." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes instantly. She finally understood. Lucien noticed the shift in her expression. "What is it?" he asked softly. Evelyn smiled through tears for the first time in years. "Small, fragile, real. My mother knew," she whispered. Something softened visibly in Lucien's face at the sight of her smile. It transformed him completely for one brief, impossible moment. The cold, terrifying Alpha King the kingdom feared disappeared, leaving only a man who looked relieved beyond words that she was finally standing before him alive. Then slowly, beneath the falling snow and the stunned eyes of the entire kingdom, Lucien Blackthorne lowered himself onto one knee before Evelyn Harper. Gasps broke across the courtyard instantly. Kings did not kneel. Not before nobles. Not before elders. Not before anyone. Yet Lucien bowed his head willingly before the girl they once called broken. Silver snow swirled around them like moonlight caught in wind. Evelyn stared down at him in complete disbelief while emotion closed painfully around her throat. Lucien lifted his eyes toward her slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried across every frozen stone of the sacred courtyard. "Before the moon goddess and every pack beneath her sky," he said clearly, "I swear my loyalty to Evelyn Harper, rightful queen of the North." One by one, wolves across the courtyard lowered themselves fully to their knees. Noble families, guards, elders. Even Celeste Ashbourne bowed her head at last beneath the overwhelming force of destiny unfolding before them. Evelyn's breath trembled softly in the cold air while silver light illuminated the snow around her feet. For the first time in her life, no one looked at her with pity. No one looked away in shame. They looked at her with awe. And standing beneath the moon beside the king who knelt willingly before her, Evelyn finally realized something the world had tried to steal from her since childhood. She had never been broken. She had simply been waiting for the moment the kingdom remembered who she truly was. During a frozen winter moon ceremony, a rejected Omega discovers that the snow itself refuses to touch her while the feared Alpha King arrives before the entire kingdom. What begins as humiliation soon becomes a shocking revelation tied to an ancient prophecy, hidden royal bloodlines, and a destiny the werewolf clans tried to erase for generations. As glowing silver snow surrounds the forgotten girl, the Alpha King realizes she is the one he has searched for across every werewolf territory in the North. Feared nobles, ancient elders, and rival packs are forced to witness the rise of a true moon queen, while the powerful ruler publicly protects the woman everyone once called broken. Filled with emotional tension, magical awakenings, royal devotion, and cinematic fantasy atmosphere, this werewolf romance story follows the journey of an outcast Omega discovering her true power beside a ruthless king willing to kneel before her in the snow. Perfect for fans of emotional werewolf drama. Fated mates, Alpha King romance, hidden identities, moon goddess prophecies, and fantasy stories where love, destiny, and courage transform an entire kingdom forever. Character 1, white-skinned Omega woman. Age 22, soft silver blonde hair, pale blue eyes, delicate features. Wearing worn white winter cloak and simple ivory dress. Front-facing portrait, cinematic snowy realism. Emotional expression, natural lighting. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Character 2, white-skinned Alpha King male. Age 32, sharp jawline, silver eyes, long black hair, powerful masculine features. Wearing elegant black royal winter coat with fur collar, front-facing portrait, cinematic realism. Intense expression, cold atmosphere. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. One cinematic fantasy realism scene during a violent winter snowstorm inside a massive sacred stone courtyard at night. White-skinned Omega woman, age 22, with silver blonde hair and pale blue eyes standing. In the center, glowing with soft silver light. Emotional, frightened expression, wearing worn white winter cloak and flowing ivory dress. White-skinned Alpha King, age 32, with long black hair and silver eyes standing protectively in front of her with intense dominant expression. Elegant black royal coat moving dramatically in the wind. Terrified noble wolves and dark priest figures surrounding them at a distance. Frozen lanterns. Silver snow swirling in magical patterns. Moonlight reflecting. Across icy stone ground. Realistic medieval fantasy kingdom atmosphere. Cinematic lighting. Dramatic emotional tension. Realistic faces. Realistic anatomy. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Ultra-detailed winter realism. Emotional storytelling composition. Dynamic storm movement. Realistic snow particles. Epic cinematic framing. 2 cinematic fantasy realism scene during early winter morning inside a quiet medieval snow-covered village. White-skinned Omega woman. Age 22, carrying a bundle of firewood through narrow frozen streets while villagers ignore her in the background. Soft, lonely expression. Pale blue eyes slightly downcast. Silver blonde hair partially hidden beneath worn white hooded cloak. Simple ivory dress with realistic fabric texture. Visible cold breath in winter air. Snowy rooftops. Small lanterns glowing warmly beside wooden homes. Distant market activity blurred softly behind her. Subtle emotional sadness and isolation. Realistic. Natural lighting. Realistic medieval fantasy environment. Detailed snow and ice textures. Cinematic realism. Atmospheric storytelling composition. Highly detailed face and hands. Soft pale winter sunlight reflecting on frozen ground. Realistic emotional photography style. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Grounded fantasy realism. Authentic winter atmosphere. Immersive cinematic depth. 3 cinematic fantasy realism scene inside a massive dark stone throne room. During a snowy winter evening, white-skinned Alpha King, age 32, standing alone beside towering frozen windows overlooking a distant kingdom. Long black hair flowing slightly in cold air entering through cracked stone. Arches, silver eyes reflecting moonlight with deep emotional loneliness beneath powerful expression. Elegant black royal clothing with fur collar and dark leather gloves. Giant wolf banners hanging from ancient walls. Silver candles flickering softly around the empty throne. Snowy mountains visible outside through icy glass. Realistic medieval fantasy atmosphere. Emotionally isolated king surrounded by silence and authority. Cinematic blue-gray lighting. Highly realistic textures. Realistic. Facial detail. Subtle emotional storytelling composition. Epic fantasy realism without exaggeration. Realistic shadows and winter ambience. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Cinematic royal loneliness. Ultra-detailed environment and clothing realism. 2 For cinematic fantasy realism confrontation scene inside the sacred winter courtyard at night. White-skinned Omega woman glowing with swirling silver snow while standing beside the white-skinned Alpha King. Frightened emotional expression mixed with awakening strength. Alpha King extending one arm protectively toward furious elder priest and terrified noble wolves confronting them across the frozen stone circle. Black royal cloak moving violently in magical wind. Silver light reflecting across icy ground and ancient pillars. Lantern flames bending sideways from supernatural energy. Dramatic emotional tension. Realistic medieval fantasy architecture. Highly detailed snowstorm atmosphere. Realistic. Human anatomy and expressions. Moonlight illuminating both characters with cinematic contrast. Immersive emotional storytelling scene. Realistic magical effects. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Dark fantasy realism. Intense cinematic composition. Realistic winter textures and lighting. 1, 2, 5 cinematic fantasy realism scene beside a frozen northern lake beneath glowing green and silver northern lights. White-skinned Omega woman, age 22, awakening hidden wolf power. While standing barefoot lightly on icy ground surrounded by soft silver energy. Calm emotional expression with tears in pale blue eyes. Silver blonde hair moving gently in cold wind. Flowing white winter dress glowing. Subtly beneath moonlight. White-skinned Alpha King watching her nearby with awe and deep devotion. Long black coat and silver eyes reflecting frozen lake light. Snow-covered pine forest surrounding them. Peaceful but powerful emotional atmosphere. Realistic winter environment. Cinematic fantasy realism. Magical silver reflections across ice surface. Realistic body proportions and natural movement. Immersive emotional storytelling composition. Ultra-detailed moonlit snow textures. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Highly realistic fantasy photography style. 1, 2, 6 cinematic fantasy realism ending scene inside a massive sacred snowy courtyard beneath bright moonlight. White-skinned Alpha King kneeling respectfully before white-skinned Omega Queen while hundreds of wolves bow in the background across frozen stone ground. Emotional expression of devotion and peace on both faces. Queen wearing elegant flowing white winter gown with silver details and soft, glowing snow surrounding her body. Alpha King in black royal coat with silver wolf crest lowering his head willingly. Snow falling gently through silver moonlight. Towering medieval fortress walls surrounding the scene. Realistic winter atmosphere. Cinematic emotional payoff. Highly detailed fantasy realism. Realistic faces and anatomy. Dramatic royal composition. Immersive storytelling image. Ultra-realistic lighting and textures. No cartoon. No cartoon. No cartoon. No CGI. No illustration. Epic emotional fantasy ending. Realistic snow particles and moonlit ambience. 1, 2.